Alright, we're going to talk about a few different things on the way that I set up my warrior. This is not the gospel. You don't have to do it just like this. Everybody has their own flavor of what they like, but I'll show you what I do and you can decide if you like it. So this is my UI. I try to keep it simple on the face of it whenever I'm not in combat. I keep a few big abilities down here that I want to know if they're available, whether I'm in combat or not. Obviously, I have a little contextual bar down here of consumables that I use. A couple of them are hotkeyed. Some of them I don't want to fat finger, so I just stick them on there and click them. That's the only time I'll ever click something and not have it hotkeyed. And then even less important ones that I would use typically out of combat are over here on the right. I want to talk about add-ons first because that's a good basis to start with. The first one that creates the UI is ElvUI. Just make sure I'm recording. Yeah. Is ElvUI. Let me open it up. Add-ons. ElvUI is one that cannot be downloaded outside, or in Twitch. It has to be downloaded outside of Twitch. You go to a website called tukui.ui, and it's there to download for Classic. It works very well, and it's a very sleek and clean layout. You can get here and do all your settings, and here it takes a very long time to set up. That would be a whole separate video. Even this simple setup that I have here took hours upon hours of tweaking and making sure everything was just right. But ElvUI is what controls my raid frames, which when I'm in a raid, I put up in the top left. I can keep them semi-transparent. I want to see health bars, I want to see mana bars, I want to see big debuffs, but I don't want to see a bunch of raid frames. More important for healers than it is for a tank or a DPS. So I try and keep them small and out of the way and more transparent to keep my screen open. And I'll post a video of a little raid snippet later so you can see that. Over here I keep my party frames when I'm in a party. Let me just see if somebody will join. Who's probably not doing anything. Let's see if Ultra joins me. Yeah, so you'll see my raid frames here. Of course, they're transparent if they're not close to me, and I'll see them thick when they are close to me. Next part is my target frames. So I have my target frame here. I don't need to see my rage bar, so I turn that off. I'll show you why in a minute. I'll also obviously see my target on the right side, and I will see their resource bar if it's rage or mana, and I will see their target of target. All pretty standard stuff for a UI. I like them right here in front of my face. I don't want to look up to the top left to see how my health is. I want to see it right there. Over here on the right side, I have my damage meters that go down to about 10. I set these to always put myself on so I see how I'm doing relative to other people, whether I'm tanking or not. And then right to the left of that, I have tiny threat. Obviously critical for a tank to see to make sure I have threat. And on the bottom here, I have my major stats that will fluctuate during a fight. Hit typically won't fluctuate, but I play around with my sets a lot to either jack my hit up to get a higher crit cap or not. So I like seeing it at a glance. Plus hit is the one thing that you don't always see on your character selection panel. You need to count it up, and I like just seeing it right here. Obviously, attack power fluctuates a lot in combat, so I want to make sure if I'm about to blow a cooldown that I'm aligning with as much attack power as I can. And then, obviously, crit is a huge one to make sure that I can see when that changes, especially when I change between stances. On the left, I have my gold. I don't know if you can see it with my overlay, but I have my gold, my durability, and guild control. As far as my chat window, I don't need to get into all this detail, but basic general chat window shows everything, combat log of course, and then I just keep my guild, whisper, and party chat in a separate window. Some people have more elegant ways, but this has always been fine for me. Otherwise, minimap time shows if I'm tracking herbs or minerals. That's it. So let's talk about some other add-ons here. Let me just kind of go down the list. We don't need to talk about all of them in depth. Addy Bags is my bag add-on. It will sort everything based on what it is. So quest items, trade goods, armor, weapons, consumables, junk, that kind of a thing. I find it very easy to use, easy to search for something, so I never miss something, and it is just sleek and clean. That's all there's really to say about that. Atlas and Atlas Salute, I'm not going to go into big detail because you should know what that is. You should have these. Atlas obviously will show you an overlay map. It's not the best. It just shows you the same map you would see in game, but it's something, and it will kind of help you guide and see through the different instances. And then Atlas loot, of course, is what everybody uses to see the boss drops. Going down the add-ons, Auctionator, that's just for auction house. Bartender 4 is something that is very important to me. As you can see from my standard UI, I only have one action bar showing. I do have a couple over here for items. Otherwise, I don't put any of my abilities on action bars. So this is Bartender 4. It lets you customize your action bars completely, and I actually hide all my action bars up in the top left corner. I do a click through here, and I turn my alpha to 0. I know my class. I leveled it from level 1, right? How many times do I really need to see every single ability that I have? Almost never. The only two abilities I don't actively use are Rend and Slam. I would use Slam if I was in the Slam spec. I would use Rend if I was in PvP and needed to keep a bleed on a rogue. Otherwise, I don't use those in PvE, so I don't even have them bound. I have my main stance abilities bound up at the top, so they will change based on what I have, and I'll go through what those are bound to and why in a minute. But that's what Bartender 4 does. The next add-on to talk about would be Cursor Mod. We don't need to talk about that. Details we already covered. Details is a mandatory required add-on. You should have Details or Recount. Details has some rounding issues, so it's not always the most accurate. I hear Recount is about right, but they're both very good. Most people use Details, and the information share is cleaner that way, so that's why for that. Exorcist Raid Tools is another required add-on, and embarrassingly, I don't even really have mine set up. Excuse me. But this will let you show appearances. Let's just do test mode. No, it's not even showing. This will let you show raid cooldowns, and I need to set it up and figure out what I broke. But this will let me see how many battle reses are up, how many innervates are up, if tranquility is available, anything like that, so that I can make callouts as a raid leader. It will also help other people so that they don't overlap things. So this is a good thing to have. It will also let me push notes to the group, so if I want to make assignments, I can make this assignment and push it, and the whole raid can just type ERT note, and they can see exactly what I'm assigning. Sorry, just a second. Okay, add-ons. So, we'll go through the rest pretty quick. Immersion was just for leveling. I just like the layout of the quest stacks better. Gather Mate is for gathering. It puts nodes on your map so you know where to go. Mixed scrolling battle text, you'll see when my actual UI pops up when I'm in combat. It just makes the numbers easier to follow in some cases. Tank Warnings Classic is if you're tanking, it does macros to yell if you taunt and it gets resisted, or you use a challenging shout, or blah blah blah. WeakAuras 2 is a very critical macro or add-on, and we're gonna talk about maybe in a separate video because it's already going long. We're gonna talk about how you would set these up and what I use as my WeakAuras. Weapon swing timer, a standard for any warrior for sure. You can see your swing timer. If you are a DPS, you don't really need to see the enemy swing timer, but you should always see your main hand swing timer. Wide quest log, I don't know if when you were leveling you realized that the quest log is terrible, so wide quest log opens it up. And we're almost through. I don't use too many crazy add-ons. LVOI we talked about. Character stats is a nice convenient one as well. This will let you contextually show what you want to look at. So I have melee on one side, defense on the other, and I can see at a glance what's my crit, what's my hit chance, what's my attack speed, attack power, damage, what's my defense sitting at, dodge, parry, block, blah blah blah. Outfitter is another one that I use if I want to change weapon sets on the fly really quickly out of combat. I'll use that one. That's very useful for warriors as well. The only other one really to talk about is Deadly Boss Mods, which is another required add-on that just yells at you and tells you to stand out of the fire. So that is an overview of the add-ons that I use. Now, that's just scratching the surface. The biggest add-on that I use is WeakAuras, and I'm going to type this in and you're going to see my screen explode here because I use a lot of WeakAuras. I use WeakAuras to essentially tell me how to play my class. Everything you see on the screen right now is every WeakAura that I use. Obviously, if they all popped up at once, this would be the ugliest UI you've ever seen. But these all come up when I tell them to. They're all completely contextual, and I'm going to get into combat here and show you what I mean. I use custom textures for my WeakAuras. You can use icons and keep it simple, but I like to use custom textures because I think it's more interesting to play the game. So I'm going to enter combat here, and it's going to tell me a lot of information here that I want to see. First of all, I've got a good nameplate. I've got a good debuff tracker on my enemy. I've got arrows over here indicating what enemy I'm actually attacking, and then I have all this information here. So going through kind of least important to most important, over here are my standard general cooldowns. I want to know when my disarm is up, and if I use it, I want to know when it's on cooldown and when it's coming back. So I desaturate it, and then whenever it runs back out and it's ready to use, it's going to light up again. If I go to battle stance and I have the rage for it, I'm going to have thunderclap light up. If I'm not in battle stance, it's not going to be ready for me. Same with defensive stance with disarm. And then if I do run out of rage, my demo shout, my hamstring are going to turn gray. Again, I might need to fix my hamstring, it looks broken. I have my other normal contextual ones over here, and I have my tanking WeakAuras over here. This tells me when taunt is available. I just use mocking blows, so put that on cooldown for 2 minutes. And I just use taunt, that's on cooldown, and challenging shout. Now all those are gray and on cooldown. I'll always know whenever I have a taunt available, because it's right there, big, circular, and right in my face. We didn't come back again. Okay, so back in combat again. Notice the Carry and Devour dodged. I want to know when my overpower's up, so that's what that on the nameplate is. I also have a WeakAura 2 axes that show up over here whenever I have an overpower available. This is more important for DPS if you're spec'd at all into overpower. You want to use that as much as you can. You don't want to lose rage from it, from switching over, but you do want to use it if it's available, because it's almost not a guaranteed crit, but with my 26% plus 25%, that's a 50% chance to get a big fat crit off of an overpower. Off of an overpower. The other contextual pieces here, the angry face here is my battle shout. Whenever it's ready, he lights up red. When he's not, he's gray. This is my rage bar. I have it color coded, so whenever there's no color here, it's gray. This means I'm not going to lose any rage if I change stances. When it turns yellow, I know I am going to lose rage back down if I change stances. So if I'm in a stance and it's creeping up into the yellow, then I really want to be careful and really make a decision. Do I want to sacrifice all that rage, or can I blow some heroic strikes to get rid of it? Obviously that plays in more whenever you're an execute or switching for an overpower. I don't know why I can't talk, sorry. Oh cool, I got slime. The other ones are a little bit more obvious. My either Mortal Strike or Bloodthirst or Shield Slam is going to be the Shaking Fist. When it's ready, it is saturated and shaking. When it is on cooldown, I don't even show it because I don't care. And then if I don't have the rage for it, there's those 2 axes for overpower, by the way. Let me heal up. If I don't have the rage for it, but it's not on cooldown, it shows up as gray. So I always know kind of what state it's in. A lot of things, if they're on cooldown, but I use them on cooldown, I don't really care if it's not available yet. The rage should be coming fast enough, I don't really have to plan for it. So I don't even show it. I don't want it cluttering up my screen. I hate clutter. I know it looks like I don't, but I do. The only other one is Whirlwind. Again, I have a full rage bar. It's telling me that I can use Whirlwind, but it's a little bit transparent and darker because I'm not in the right stance for it. So I click over to battle stance, my rage bar goes down, but then this saturates back up and it's pulsing and says I can use Whirlwind. Now it's on cooldown. Bloodthirst, now it's on cooldown. Let's do one more, maybe one more mob here. There's the overpower. I also have this pulsing axe up here if I'm rage capped. You never want to be rage capped as a warrior if you can help it. Whenever that happens, you have to start spamming cleave or heroic strike to dump that rage as fast as you can. Rage cap is just pouring DPS into a bucket. Or a strainer, and it just runs right through. This is my execute, obviously, the 2 dancing swords, so that will get those. That will remind you to execute. And the only other one is the cooldowns down here. This changes depending on what spec I am. If I am prot, it's concussion blow. If I'm in DPS, it's death wish. So I just use death wish. Notice my horns now are desaturated. You're going to start seeing a purple bar start to refill here. Oh my gosh, stop killing. See the purple bar fill. I'll also see that out of combat. No, I won't. I guess I need to turn that back on. It is refilling. Now the only other one I have is I have a fire here whenever I have Last Stand talented, and it shows up as a fire, and then I have this orange bar cooldown for Last Stand, so that I always know when that's available too. You see my big cooldowns for Recklessness, Shield Wall, or Retaliation are over on this side when I'm in combat. Other than that, that's pretty much the whole thing. Everything does change contextually depending on which stance I'm in. So whether I can use it or not changes the way that the WeakAura behaves. And they take a lot of time to set up. So if anybody actually wants to copy some of these, I can share these WeakAuras with you, and we can work on setting them up. I would have to actually Dropbox you the textures to use. Even these circular textures, I made those in Photoshop. So I just like the circle look better, so I just cut them down and made them in Photoshop. But you have to actually link it to a folder on in your interface folder to pull the right texture in. Otherwise, I'm going to end this video here for that brief bit, just to show you a little bit of background about the UI itself. I'll make a separate video to talk about actual warrior rotations, and then the macros that I use. I use quite a few macros here, and we can walk through what those are a little bit later. But pretty much every ability, if you notice up here, every ability that I use has some sort of a macro on it. Most of them. And a lot of them are a simple start attack macro. If I hit a button, I want to be attacking something. Classic's really bad about the start attack, so you always have to have a macro for that. Anyway, thank you. Hope that this is helpful in some way. If you have more questions, let me know, and we will get you set up with a UI overhaul if you're interested.